Make sure you're following Ann Coulter on Twitter. Lots of tweets every day. Ann Coulter, how you doing?
Fantastic. How are you, Mark Simone?
Very good. Have you had the nerve to go out to restaurants yet?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, as soon as I could.
And but let's go back to this book. I forgot about this book, Demonic. But, boy, you predict a lot of stuff about these. Explain the theory of the left-wing mob and how it works.
Oh, thank you for asking. I keep meaning to do a column that's just a précis, not only of Demonic, about the mobs, how they're used by the Democratic Party, Republican Party, very un-mob-like. But, you know, the news, it's just been like a fire hose. So I've been waiting for, you know, I'll take a week and go to the Grand Canyon. Here's a prick, because it'll be an easy book to write since I spent a long time researching it and writing it. And it's about mob behavior and mob psychology. The father of it is Gustave Le Bon, who wrote a book. He must have lived at some point during the French Revolution. It was, I think, about 50 years after the French Revolution. And that's what it really ties to. The French Revolution, contrary to everything you've been taught in school, French Revolution and American Revolution were exact opposites. Ours was a revolution based on Christianity, based on thinkers and writers. In fact, they couldn't stop prattling about their revolution and the Declaration of Independence, explaining to the world why we were breaking away from England. The French Revolution was as if the Manson family took over the country. It was just peasant mobs running around. They explained nothing. It was very much like what we're seeing now and what we've seen in periodic left-wing outbreaks in this country. Even when the Democratic Party, I mean, their being is very mob-like, just in the psychology and how they talk, how they turn their leaders into messiahs, and their opponents are just the deepest, darkest enemies. I mean, you never have, this is a small point, but you'll know what I'm talking about, you never have Republicans burning like Bill Clinton in effigy or making citizens arrests of Obama. No, but with them, it can be Bush. I mean, it's obviously on overdrive with Trump, but Bush, Nixon, the rest of them, they have to be absolute 100% evil. And their leaders, the Obamas and the Clintons, the liberal women are always writing articles in the New York Times about how they fantasize about having sex with them. But then they use, as they did, and the French Revolution is the model. It went to Russia, it went to Cuba, it went to Cambodia. They will destroy all tradition, tear down everything that existed. They start with year one. In the French Revolution, they actually changed the names of the months. And they're always incredibly violent. That's what surprised me when I wrote the book. Obviously, I read a lot about the French Revolution. I was a history major at Cornell. I sent the French Revolution chapters to some of my friends from Cornell, and they emailed back saying, Anna, we were history majors at an Ivy League college. Why don't either of us know this? And so I put in the book, I looked up various Ivy League schools and their course offerings, and wow, they don't want to teach the French Revolution. They would see themselves in this too much, which is stunning because it's not only an incredibly important part of history, but I gather, reading about Ted Bundy and Charles Manson is pretty popular from seeing, the offerings on biography TV. It's a pretty fascinating part of history, the bloodthirstiness of it, the black masses at Notre Dame, which they tore apart. There was one member of the revolution, it reminds me of the mobs today, and I'm sorry, I'll pause for a breath in a moment, but boy, did you hit a vein with me. One member of the revolution shows up and proudly announces, opens a box with his parents' heads in it to present to the revolutionaries. And wasn't Robespierre impressed with that? Because they would tear down everything that was old. If you were not with the revolution, you were the enemy and would be beheaded.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Doesn't this end with guillotines and all that? How do we end this? What's the best way to deal with a mob?
Force. always force. Always force, always respond with force. You cannot coddle a mob. You can't reason with a mob. The whole idea of it is, I mean, the psychology of mob behavior is also very interesting, that it's childlike. Reason doesn't work on them. It's slogans, and the more aggressive and shocking, the better, like defund the police. I mean, it's so hilarious that phrase is chosen precisely because it's outrageous and it gets the blood going and it's to the barricades. And then you turn on MSNBC and CNN and all the Democrats are saying, "Oh, defund the police doesn't mean defund the police." And then the New York Times runs an op-ed saying, "Yes, we literally mean defund the police." So yeah, they use the mobs to gain power, climb on top of them, of the wreckage, to turn themselves into Pol Pot or Stalin or Fidel Castro, and bad things lie ahead. Nothing good has ever come out of mob behavior. Never.
Well, thanks for cheering us up. But you said force, extreme force will work. So thank God we've got Bill de Blasio. Stand up.
Incidentally, I was just reading before I called into you my favorite article in weeks in the New York Times today. A neighborhood just outside of Minneapolis decided they would check their privilege and no longer call the police. So all the homeless people have moved in, the criminals, they're all sitting around. Well, I couldn't help myself. I started to dial 911 when two 15-year-old boys pulled a gun on me and tried to steal my car. But the guy refuses to press charges.
Okay.
You got to read this article. These are the dumbest white people in America.
Hey, this NASCAR guy with the noose, you said in the beginning, you called this one, you said, whenever it's a noose, it's not going to turn out to be real. And it turned out it wasn't a noose. And how'd you know that? You were way ahead of it.
Coincidentally, I wrote another book about that, Mugged, about racial demagoguery that goes through all sorts of, what happens when you treat black people or fellow citizens like children, patronize them, let them get away with anything. That's not good either. And that was the world we lived in, which, boy, we have returned to in a rush. We lived in that world up until the arc of the book is how this constant patronizing of black people and excusing their crimes because of white guilt. Well, white guilt went away with the OJ verdict. White America sat back, ashen-faced. So that's an interesting book to see what happens when you overly patronize. And by the way, I go through a list of fake nooses. If a noose is ever hung by a racist, if it turns out not to be a hoax, it will be the first case in at least 30 years.
Well, if you want two good books to read, because you probably read every book you have during this confinement, but get the book Demonic and get the book Mugged. Two great books by Ann Coulter. In fact, you should start pushing them again because very relevant right now, these two books.
Yes, they are. Thank you.
And go to AnnCoulter.com. You can get everything there. Also, a lot of great stuff, AnnCoulter.com, a whole new website. Make sure you follow Ann Coulter on Twitter. She's tweeting furiously all day long. Great stuff. AnnCoulter.com. Ann Coulter, thanks for being with us.
Good to talk to you, Mark Simone. Bye-bye.
All right, take care.